Joe is a 4-year-old male who shows difficulties in social communication and social interactions. He displays a variety of restricted and repetitive behaviors that fall under the DSM-5 diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorder. While interacting with others, Joe displays challenges connecting with them by not acknowledging their presence, either through lack of eye contact or by facing away from the other individual in the interaction. Joe also has difficulties developing and maintaining relationships, as he often uses people as objects and prefers to play alone. He does not use gestures or single words to express his needs or wants. Joe is able to mimic a few sounds, but they are very limited. Joe also has a difficult time with transitions or changes in his daily routines. He currently demonstrates a fixation on certain interests. He also shows more interest in the sounds that objects make rather than using them for their targeted function. Joe seeks sensory input when he's rocked back and forth in a chair or on someone's lap. He puts objects in his mouth and/or he wants to be hugged or squeezed tightly. Joe has participated in an intensive day patient feeding program, as well as occupational therapy at the Children's Hospital of Richmond. He has attended the Prince Edward County Early Childhood Special Education Program for 2 years. Joe is only able to tolerate smooth baby food and will not eat any textured meal, for example, macaroni. Joe currently has food allergies to corn, garlic, egg, peanut, olives, and olive oil. He has to take medicine to help with his sleep, acid reflux, constipation, and anemia. Joe has also been diagnosed with bronchiolitis and presently displays oral aversion, oral motor delays, dysphagia, certain food refusals, and inappropriate mealtime behaviors. For example, during mealtime, Joe does not sit in any seat and his arms and hands must be blocked. Functional outcome. Joe will increase appropriate behaviors during mealtime, specifically during transitions and while interacting with feeders. Long-term goal. Joe will tolerate sitting in an adaptive chair for 30 minutes without requiring any blocking, while intermittently being fed a familiar and desired food in 3 consecutive sessions. Short-term goal. Following a shared social story, Joe will sit in an adaptive chair at the table for 10 minutes using a visual and audible timer. Session objective. Following explicit instruction while being shown a picture card, Joe will imitate the targeted behavior associated with the object represented on the picture card in 3 of 5 or 60% of opportunities with direct clinician modeling. The intervention used with Joe is a social story approach. The social story would be individualized to Joe's needs to facilitate his social understanding in the context of a difficult scenario. Based on his present level of performance, Joe has a difficult time during mealtime. In addition to his food refusals and comorbid issues regarding his food intake, Joe's social feeding experience is a negative one. Joe does not sit in a seat and requires significant blocking, needing more than one person to feed him. Joe may relate food and sitting at a table with an experience that is not enjoyable for him. The purpose of the social story used with Joe is to turn feeding into a positive experience. Due to Joe's limited receptive and expressive language skills, the clinician needs to model for him how a social story is used and how it connects with his present environment. His session objective breaks down the social stories into steps to teach Joe that the pictures represent a sequence of events with a beginning, middle, and end. This will build his social thinking between the picture and the action expected from him during mealtimes. Individuals with autism spectrum disorders often have feeding issues, and even if the restricted eating habits of a child with ASD do not adversely affect his or her health, they may nonetheless have leading to inappropriate behaviors and a negative social interaction with those around him. The majority of research associated with social stories are a single subject design. While single subject signs are usually considered to be a lower tier of evidence, the National Standards Project determined that the single subject studies regarding social stories gave them sufficient evidence to determine that this treatment produces positive outcomes for individuals with ASD. As a result, they identified social stories as one of their 11 established treatments. Using social stories helps to replace maladaptive behaviors into ones that are more appropriate. Social stories were originally created to help children with ASD manage their behaviors, specifically in social settings, but have since expanded to work on a wider range of behaviors. Social stories have been known to be very helpful with individuals with ASD because they are adapted specifically to the individual's needs. It has been found that using additional supports like visual schedules optimize the individual's performance while using social stories. Social stories provide opportunities to use these visual supports that have not only been proven to be useful with individuals with ASD in general, but also ones that are personalized to Joe's specific and exact needs. The intervention will take place in a therapy room. The client and clinician will be in the room while caregivers and other professionals observe outside the room. When implementing the session objective, the clinician will first introduce a visual that will be used in the social story on a picture card with no text and describe the object to Joe. Using hand over hand, the clinician and Joe will hold the picture card and take it to the physical object it is representing. All objects used in the social story will be placed in the therapy room by the clinician before the session begins. The clinician will then model the appropriate behavior associated with that specific object, which Joe will imitate. The clinician and Joe will then return to their original place with the other picture cards and repeat these actions for each visual used in the social story. The main goal of this session objective is for Joe to begin to make connections between the visuals that will be used in the social stories and the physical objects in his environment that they represent. By doing so, this will increase his awareness of the social story, allowing for more advanced behaviors to later be described in the social stories. The visuals used on the picture cards will be the same pictures the clinicians will use to create a social story for Joe later in therapy. This will allow him to become familiar with these visuals independently before they are combined into a full story. The other materials used in therapy will be chosen based on what Joe has already been introduced to, specifically during mealtime. These include an adaptive chair, a spoon, a plate or bowl, and smooth baby food. A new support will be added into therapy, a visual and audible timer. The timer will assist Joe so that he can begin to understand that there is a clear beginning and end to mealtimes, as mealtime ends when the timer dings, as well as the amount of time that is left throughout the mealtime. According to Carol Gray, the creator of social stories, the recommended data collection to use are simple frequency tallies of behaviors. The data that will be collected for Joe will follow that recommended method of using the simple frequency tallies of behaviors during the session objective activity. A tally will be based off of whether or not Joe imitates the clinician's model of the appropriate behavior associated with the targeted object. A sample of the data collection sheet that will be used during therapy is currently being shown. As seen on the data collection form, each targeted object is listed. Each object will either receive or not receive a tally in the box next to it, depending on if Joe imitates the object's function. The clinician will monitor and compare which object's function Joe correctly imitates to see if there is a trend. The form also provides space on the bottom to report on other behaviors that Joe may demonstrate instead of the targeted behaviors during therapy.
Hi, Ms. Smith. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Okay, so today we're going to begin to use a strategy called social story during a mealtime. So social stories take scenarios of a situation that are difficult for Joe and teach him the correct way to behave in that situation. So because we're not sure how well Joe understands our oral instructions, before we read him a full social story, we will need to model for him how the objects in the social story connect to real objects. So today we will use pictures of objects he uses during mealtime and practice the appropriate behaviors that go along with that object. For example, sitting in a chair. Do you have any questions?
Do I start doing this at home?
No, not yet. We will work on the strategy first here. So you will observe first until Joe is demonstrating the strategies correctly here. Then we will have you participate in the sessions. So once you and Joe both feel comfortable with the strategy, then you can start working on this at home.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Joe, look. This is a chair. The chair. We sit on the chair. You do it. Good job sitting at the table. Look, Joe. Joe, look at me. Joe, look at me. Look. This is a timer. When the timer beeps, meal is all done. Okay. Look. A spoon. Spoon. We eat with the spoon. We spoon the food. You try. It's okay. Oh, look. Plate.